Welcome to Heartline Stories. Today's story follows a poor single mom who brings her child to work, never expecting the incredible twist that awaits. What happens when her baby hugs the powerful billionaire CEO and calls him Daddy? Stay tuned to find out. Let us know where you're watching from in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more heartwarming tales. Once upon a time, in a big city, there lived a single mom named Nancy. Nancy had a sweet little boy named Max. Max was only 3 years old and loved his mommy very much. Nancy worked hard every day to make sure Max was happy. She worked at a big company where the boss was a very important man named Mr. Anderson. Mr. Anderson was the CEO of the company. He was always busy and sometimes looked very serious, but Nancy always tried her best to do her job well. One day, Nancy had a big problem. Max's daycare was closed, and she had no one to take care of him. She didn't want to miss work, so she decided to take Max with her to the office. Max was excited to see where his mommy worked. When they arrived at the office, Nancy told Max to be on his best behavior. She gave him some toys and coloring books to keep him busy. Max promised to be good and sat quietly next to Nancy's desk. While Nancy was working, Max colored pictures and played with his toys. Everyone in the office thought Max was very cute and friendly. They gave him smiles and little waves as they walked by. After some time, Nancy had to go to a meeting with Mr. Anderson. She didn't want to leave Max alone, so she took him with her. Max held Nancy's hand tightly as they walked to the meeting room. When they entered the room, Mr. Anderson looked up from his papers and saw Max. He smiled kindly at the little boy. Nancy introduced Max to Mr. Anderson, and Max waved shyly. "Hello, Max," Mr. Anderson said. "It's nice to meet you." Max looked at Mr. Anderson and suddenly, without warning, ran up to him and hugged him tightly. "Daddy!" Max exclaimed. Nancy was shocked and a bit embarrassed. "Max, Mr. Anderson is not your daddy," she said gently. Mr. Anderson laughed softly and patted Max on the head. "It's okay, Nancy. Max is just a little confused." Nancy smiled nervously, but Mr. Anderson's kind reaction made her feel better. Nancy felt relieved that Mr. Anderson was so understanding. She sat down for the meeting, keeping an eye on Max, who was now sitting comfortably on Mr. Anderson's lap. Mr. Anderson and Nancy discussed the business matters, while Max played with a toy car Mr. Anderson had on his desk. Mr. Anderson asked Nancy about her work and her life. Nancy shared her story about being a single mom and trying to provide the best life for Max. Mr. Anderson listened carefully and nodded understandingly. He seemed to admire Nancy's dedication and hard work. After the meeting, Mr. Anderson walked Nancy and Max back to her desk. He handed Max a small stuffed bear he had in his office. "This is for you, Max," he said with a warm smile. Max hugged the bear tightly and said, "Thank you, Mr. Anderson." Nancy thanked Mr. Anderson as well and watched as he walked back to his office. She felt grateful for his kindness and understanding. A few days later, Nancy received a surprise. Mr. Anderson called her into his office again. She was a bit nervous but walked in with Max by her side. Mr. Anderson smiled and invited them to sit down. "Nancy, I've been thinking about our conversation the other day," Mr. Anderson began. "I want to offer you a promotion. You've been doing an excellent job, and I think you deserve it. This new position will also give you more flexibility with your hours, so you can spend more time with Max." Nancy was overwhelmed with gratitude. She could hardly believe her ears. "Thank you so much, Mr. Anderson. This means a lot to me and Max." Mr. Anderson nodded. "You're very welcome, Nancy. You're an important part of our team, and we want to support you in any way we can." Nancy left Mr. Anderson's office with a big smile on her face and a heart full of hope. She hugged Max tightly and whispered, "Things are going to get better for us, Max." "I promise." Max looked up at her with his big innocent eyes and hugged her back. "I love you, Mommy." Nancy's heart swelled with love for her son. She knew that no matter what challenges they faced, they would always have each other. Nancy's promotion made her life a little easier. She now had more time to spend with Max, and she was able to take him to the park more often. They loved playing on the swings and feeding the ducks by the pond. Max was always full of energy and laughter, and his happiness made Nancy feel like everything was worth it. One sunny afternoon, Nancy and Max were at the park when they saw Mr. Anderson walking his dog. Max recognized him right away and ran over to him. "Mr. Anderson!" he called out with excitement. Mr. Anderson smiled and waved. "Hello, Max." "Hello, Nancy," he said, coming closer. His dog, a friendly golden retriever, wagged its tail and sniffed at Max. Max giggled and petted the dog. "What's your dog's name?" he asked. "This is Buddy," Mr. Anderson replied. "He loves making new friends." Nancy and Mr. Anderson chatted for a while as Max played with Buddy. Nancy was happy to see Max having so much fun. Mr. Anderson told Nancy how impressed he was with her work and how he appreciated her dedication. Nancy blushed and thanked him for his kind words. As the days went by, Mr. Anderson started inviting Nancy and Max to more events. They went to company picnics, holiday parties, and even to Mr. Anderson's house for a barbecue. Max loved spending time with Mr. Anderson, and Nancy enjoyed seeing her son so happy. One day while Nancy was at work, she received a phone call from Max's daycare. They told her that Max wasn't feeling well and that she needed to come pick him up. Nancy quickly left work and hurried to the daycare. When she arrived, she found Max lying on a small cot, looking pale and tired. "Mommy, I don't feel good," he said weakly. Nancy picked him up and hugged him. "Don't worry, Max. We'll get you home and make you feel better," she said gently. On their way home, Nancy stopped by the pharmacy to get some medicine for Max. While she was there, she bumped into Mr. Anderson. He saw how worried she was and offered to help. "Is everything okay, Nancy?" he asked with concern. "Max isn't feeling well. I'm just getting some medicine for him," Nancy explained. Mr. Anderson looked at Max and then back at Nancy. "Why don't you let me drive you both home? It'll be quicker and easier for you," he offered. Nancy hesitated but then agreed. "Thank you, Mr. Anderson. That's very kind of you," she said. Mr. Anderson helped Nancy and Max into his car and drove them home. On the way, Max dozed off in the back seat, clutching his new stuffed bear tightly. Nancy was thankful for Mr. Anderson's kindness and support. When they arrived at Nancy's home, Mr. Anderson carried Max inside and laid him down on the couch. Nancy quickly prepared a bowl of soup and brought it to Max, who was starting to wake up. "Here, sweetie, have some soup. It'll make you feel better," Nancy said, gently spoon-feeding Max. Mr. Anderson watched quietly, impressed by Nancy's care and love for her son. "Thank you for your help, Mr. Anderson," Nancy said, turning to him. "I don't know what I would have done without you." "It's no trouble at all, Nancy. I'm glad I could help," Mr. Anderson replied with a warm smile. "Please call me Mike when we're not at work." Nancy smiled back. "Thank you, Mike." As the days passed, Nancy and Mr. Anderson, now Mike, grew closer. He would often check on Nancy and Max, making sure they were doing well. Max became very fond of Mike, and they would spend time playing together whenever Mike visited. One evening, Mike invited Nancy and Max to dinner at his house. Nancy was a bit nervous but accepted the invitation. She wanted to show her appreciation for all the support Mike had given them. When they arrived at Mike's house, they were greeted by Buddy, the friendly golden retriever. Max ran to Buddy and hugged him tightly, while Nancy and Mike shared a laugh. During dinner, they talked and laughed, sharing stories about their lives. Nancy felt comfortable and happy, surrounded by people who cared about her and Max. After dinner, Mike took out a box of old toys from his attic and let Max pick out some to play with. Max's eyes lit up with excitement as he explored the box. Nancy watched with a smile, feeling grateful for the happiness Mike had brought into their lives. As the evening came to an end, Mike walked Nancy and Max to their car. "Thank you for a wonderful evening, Mike," Nancy said. "We had a great time. I'm glad you enjoyed it. You and Max are always welcome here," Mike replied warmly. Mike became an even bigger part of Nancy and Max's lives. He was always there to lend a helping hand or to share a laugh. Nancy started to feel like she had found a true friend in Mike. One day, Mike invited Nancy and Max to a big company event. It was a fancy gala held at a grand hotel. Nancy was a bit nervous about attending such a fancy event, but Mike assured her that she and Max would have a great time. Nancy dressed Max in his best clothes and put on a lovely dress herself. When they arrived at the gala, they were amazed by the beautiful decorations and the elegant atmosphere. Max's eyes widened with wonder as he looked around. Mike greeted them at the entrance and escorted them inside. "You both look wonderful," he said with a warm smile. "I'm so glad you could make it." Nancy and Max enjoyed the evening, meeting new people and trying delicious food. Max was especially excited about the dessert table, which was filled with all sorts of sweets. Mike introduced Nancy to many important people at the company, and they all praised her for her hard work and dedication. As the night went on, there was a moment when the music started playing softly, and people began to dance. Mike extended his hand to Nancy and asked, "May I have this dance?" Nancy blushed and nodded, taking his hand. They danced together, feeling a special connection growing between them. Max watched them with a big smile on his face, happy to see his mommy so joyful. After the dance, Mike took Max and Nancy outside to the hotel's garden. The moonlight illuminated the flowers, and the air was filled with the sweet scent of blossoms. It was a magical moment. "Thank you for being a part of our lives, Mike," Nancy said softly. "You've made such a difference for Max and me." Mike looked at Nancy and Max with a gentle smile. "You both mean a lot to me," he replied. "I'm grateful to have you in my life." As Nancy, Max, and Mike stood in the moonlit garden, enjoying the serene moment, Max suddenly tugged at Nancy's dress. "Mommy, can we visit Mr. Mike and Buddy again soon?" he asked, his eyes shining with hope. Nancy smiled and glanced at Mike. "What do you think, Mike? Maybe we could plan something fun together?" Mike's face lit up with a smile. "I'd love that. How about a picnic this weekend? We can go to the park where Buddy loves to play." Max jumped with excitement. "Yes, a picnic with Buddy and Mr. Mike," he cheered. Nancy laughed, feeling a warm sense of joy. "It sounds like a plan," she agreed. The weekend arrived quickly, and Nancy prepared a delicious picnic basket filled with sandwiches, fruits, and treats. Max couldn't contain his excitement as they headed to the park. When they arrived, they saw Mike and Buddy waiting for them, with Buddy wagging his tail eagerly. They found a nice spot under a big tree and spread out a blanket. Max ran around with Buddy, playing fetch and laughing. Mike and Nancy watched them, feeling happy to see Max so full of joy. As they enjoyed their picnic, Mike shared stories from his childhood, making Max and Nancy laugh. They talked about their hopes and dreams, and Nancy realized how much she had come to value Mike's friendship and support. After the picnic, they took a walk through the park, enjoying the beauty of nature. Max held Mike's hand, feeling safe and happy. Nancy felt a sense of peace she hadn't felt in a long time. As the sun began to set, they decided to head home. Mike drove Nancy and Max back to their house, and they thanked him for a wonderful day. "Thank you, Mike. We had such a great time," Nancy said with a smile. Mike smiled back. "I'm glad you enjoyed it. Let's do it again soon." Nancy, Max, and Mike formed an unbreakable bond. Max continued to grow, and his affection for Mike never wavered. The love and support from Mike brought stability and joy into their lives. One sunny afternoon, Mike invited Nancy and Max over for a special dinner. Nancy dressed Max in his nicest clothes, and they both felt a sense of excitement as they approached Mike's house. When they arrived, they were greeted by Buddy, who wagged his tail happily. Mike welcomed them inside, and they enjoyed a delicious meal together. After dinner, Mike brought out a small box and handed it to Nancy. She opened it to find a beautiful necklace with a heart-shaped pendant. "Nancy," Mike began, "you and Max have brought so much happiness into my life. I want us to be a family. Will you marry me?" Nancy's eyes filled with tears of joy. She looked at Max, who was beaming with excitement, and then back at Mike. "Yes, Mike," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "We would love to be a family." Max ran to Mike and hugged him tightly. "Daddy!" he exclaimed, his voice filled with happiness. From that day on, Nancy, Max, and Mike became a loving family. They faced life's challenges together, supporting each other through thick and thin. Mike's kindness and love transformed their lives, and they created a beautiful future together. And so, Nancy's journey from being a hardworking single mom to finding love and happiness with Mike showed that with hope, kindness, and love, anything is possible. Thank you for joining us on this Heartline journey. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Remember, kindness and love can create unexpected and wonderful connections.